the crew that have organised this whole conference have got an impeccable ability to pull together bloody incredible humans onto the same panel. So I'm glad that there's a few more of you that have snuck in to listen to these four, because I've worked with two of them fairly closely, but wow, you read through the backstory on the other two and you are breathtaking humans. Let me tell you who we've got up here. So Rob, raise your hand, Rob. Rob Perkin, who grew up in these lands, actually, was an organic farmer in a previous life and a market gardener. And really since 2004 has been the spearhead of Food Connect in Brisbane. So he founded that. It's a multi-farmer food distribution enterprise with an innovative community-based distribution system. And his partner Emma Kate and himself were also spearheading a really innovative way to take community-led ownership. Just 2 years ago, they raised $2 million in equity from 530 of their customers and supporters to purchase and retrofit the shed that now operates, did you say 30 enterprises? 32. About 32 enterprises out of this one location. He also is one of the advisors for the Sustainable Table. And recently he has worked with Courtney and her partner Ian to put together a community-scale flour mill that works specifically for Queensland conditions. And for the past 2 years, he's been milling flour from all sorts of grains. He was pretty loud as a voice in the foundation of the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance and was a founding director of the international software organisation, the Open Food Network, of which Serenity Hill is here from. I'm exhausted thinking about it. Anyway, you'll hear from him in just a moment. We've also got Stephen Walter, who started growing grain at just the age of 9. From Boehm.
Actually
8. 8, sorry. God, I just shot his career short. Sorry. He farms in Boehm, farms biodynamically, and actually we're going to deep dive into farming practices throughout this conversation, because I think it's those kind of stories that really bring this stuff to life. And there's some statistics here that I'm going to read to you. A La Trobe University study found that the soil water infiltration rates at Boehm to be 7 to 14 times greater compared to its conventional neighbours. That is unbelievable. Stephen loves baking sourdough for his wife Tanya and their 3 children on their 3,000-acre family farm. And during 2020 and to 2022, Steve and Tanya cleared and bagged 317 tonnes of produce, all grown and fed out to the Victorian community. Court is from my neck of the woods. She's a farmer and artist and mother based in Rutherglen. She runs Woodstock Flour with her husband Ian, and they produce whole grain, stone ground flour from organic grain that they and their in-laws grow. Woodstock Flour distributes to artisan bakeries and home bakers across Victoria and New South Wales, and Court sees farming as the most effective way to create landscape change through the building of soil, biodiversity and community. Courtney is passionate about fostering a local grain economy where grain is appreciated and valued for its diversity and regionality. So no longer looking at those 65-cent bags of black and gold flour on the supermarket shelf. And Topher, you are our last. Topher Boehm is an obsessive learner and inquiry who sees intrinsic value in every aspect of culture. He describes himself as the BFG, collecting all of the individual ingredients. I think I read that in a Gourmet Traveller somewhere. Yes, is that what it was in? He spent 4 years as a professional brewer in Sydney and then travelled extensively to Europe and his native Texas, learning old world techniques necessary to make wild mixed fermentation beers. Wildflower was created in 2016, brewing barrel-aged ales, wholly fermented by a diversity of yeasts and bacteria collected from flowers native to New South Wales. He hopes that Wildflower will inspire makers of all kinds to draw on what's around them to craft beautiful things and that bring joy. What an amazing team of 4 we have on the panel. We're here to talk about regenerative ag, and we're here to talk about what impact that can have into the grain sector. we've been asked to keep it at a fairly high level, but we're going to kind of oscillate a little bit between. In order to kick that off, I'm quite keen to ask, over the time that you've been doing what you're doing, and some is long, some is short, but what has been the one thing you would like to share with those who are listening that is worth sharing because it's inspirational and worth us all knowing about? Robert, do you want to kick us off?
Sure.
And then maybe pass it down.
Thanks, and thanks Pippa and everyone for inviting me down. I watched the 2019 recordings relentlessly through COVID. They were so inspiring, so it's just so cool to be here. So one of the, as Jade was saying, the single most inspiring thing we did, Emma and I, is we were looking at lots of things when we started Food Connect. There was sort of 4 parallel things we wanted to do. One was a multi-farmer distribution setup aggregation that was based on a community distribution model. The second one was empower young people to go back out and farm. The other one was to set up pathways for access to land in a custodianship model. And the third one was to build a community consumer awareness group that would come together and work with us and farmers in what we were trying to do and build that broad base of knowledge sharing and momentum that would take humanity to where it needs to go. We were renting a warehouse in Brisbane, and our landlord was a lovely guy, but he rarely spent any money on the place, and we were adding to the asset base all the time. We put kitchens in, we put cold rooms in, we done up all the offices, we did all these fancy things, and then we got to about the 10-year mark, and Emma and I, we'd paid him $1 million in rent by that stage, and we were sort of looking at each other going, this sucks. And in the meantime, we went to our first, the Brisbane Convention Centre, where they had the big food and wine expo, and we'd always poo-pooed that because it was all la-di-da and they didn't appreciate what we were doing at that sort of grassroots level. But 6 of us got together, Barambah Organics. We were offered a stall at $3,000 for the 4 days, and we went, shit, we can't afford $3,000, and for 4 days that's a lot of work. So we got together with 5 other enterprises and said, why don't we all share this 2 by 3 metre stall for 4 days? And everyone said, yep, $500 in, we're in. And at the end of the 4 days, we had such a wonderful time together. We learnt all about each other's products. We shared, talking and pitching about each other's products. We all had different diverse sets of skills. So like Ugly Duck Jams, she was just amazing at presenting the stall. So she would keep the stall just looking absolutely as pretty as anything and beautifully laid out. But at the end of it, the 6 of us were sitting having a beer, and we were all talking about, one of them was renting out at out in the boondocks where they hated the garlic smells and the landlord sucked. Another one was in another place where there was no public transport and they wanted to employ people from marginalised communities, and it was just really difficult for them. And then we sort of said, well, we're all renting a forklift, we're all renting a printer, we're all paying exorbitant rent, we're all renting vans or buying vans, and we've got this there are all these barriers from an overheads point of view in front of us, and we all sort of said, wouldn't it be great if we're all in the one warehouse together and we just shared the printer and the forklift, and we had the same sort of just lovely conversations and sharing of knowledge and this diverse skill set where we were learning off each other. Wouldn't it be great if we're all in the same warehouse together? And so we put our heads together. We weren't thinking it was going to be our warehouse, but eventually when we pressured Wayne, the landlord, we sort of thought, well, actually, this warehouse is joined to another warehouse, which is joined to another warehouse. It's quite a big space. In the end, we didn't have any money. We're a social enterprise. We were employing about 35 people at the time. There was absolutely no way we'd get any capital from the traditional banks, and the equity crowdfunding legislation had just been passed. No one knew anything about it except this chick from New Zealand. And she was flown over to give a hot desk by the Queensland government for 6 months. And we met her at the plane and just become big fanboy of her. Emma did the course, and 6 months later we realised we could actually use this model to raise money. We had to raise $2 million. We've now raised just over $3 million in equity. and all sorts of really funky financial things that we're bringing into the RIF in terms of access to that capital really flexibly and at it was right time, right money and right mindset from the investor's point of view. Anyway, we successfully raised and we successfully raised over nearly $2.2 million in that first raise over 3 months from 522 people at the time. But the incredible thing was the 6 impact investors, or the 7 impact investors that I went and spoke to, because bearing in mind this is a custodianship model, not a land play or an asset play, which a lot of them were thinking this is going to be an asset play. And when I spoke to the impact, and we had 4 wealthy individuals from Melbourne say, we'll buy that warehouse for you, we'll put $4 million down, but Emma said, that's not shifting the dial on anything, that's just 4 white guys from Melbourne. What's the difference between them and 1 white guy from Brisbane? And so the six there was another impact investor who leant into the idea of not having the asset as the capital base, the appreciation of the asset as the... Because I kept saying, you know, it's just steel on steel. What value is that compared to all of the enterprises inside this building doing amazing things? Like that's the real impact, that's the real investment. And because I was very worried that some of them would say, yep, you can have, you know, $200,000, $300,000 in equity, but I've got to go on the board, or I need to be, you know, I need to have my whatever it is, 7%. I mean, some of them come to us and said we'll have 15% returns, and we just sort of. So it was a long time filtering through, and eventually found 7 impact investors who funded $1 million, and the community come in with the other $1 million and a bit more. And but the 7 impact investors who had a lot of money were really leaning into what we were trying to do in the world rather than the asset play or the financial play and everything else. And they were very inspired because Emma wrote the offer document, which is the prospectus, and she wrote it in a way that we filtered out. We wanted to filter out the sort of extractive investor types, business as usual. And Emma had a secret ambition that she wanted, because women are currently underrepresented in owning, you know, industrial land and these sort of things. She had a secret agenda to have at least 50% of the ownership with women. We ended up with 84% of the ownership from women. It was remarkable, and that was the most inspiring thing that probably, you know, has tipped me into this space where I'm working with Jade and the amazing funders who are coming together to basically uproot this extractive ownership model into something that we can all lean into. And as you know, Matt was saying before, we only know 2% of what's happening in the soil. I think we only know 2% of what we have in our heads and our hearts and our hands. As a society, I think there's so much, and I saw that in that raise. There were so many people leaning into all their faculties to a different idea, a different model that was inspiring from the heart. It wasn't something, you know, they were thinking about in terms of, you know, what can I get out of this, you know, from a revenue point of view. And we had many tough conversations. We had to leave a lot of investors and say, listen, you know, no thanks, I'd love your money, but no thanks, because that's going to hamstring us down the track. So it's, yeah, no worries.
Well, on to Courtney.
Sorry.
I guess we've been milling flour for over 6 years, and we've only recently purchased our own 100 acres in Rutherglen, maybe nearly 2 years ago now. So in terms of the regenerative farming thing, when we're out on our own, we're still really on the ground learning a lot. But I guess what I've learnt from my in-laws, from Ian's parents, who are in Berrigan, where most of the grain comes from, it's a certified organic farm. And, you know, they've got a long way to go in terms of regenerative farming practices, but I've just learnt from them and their consistency through a pretty bad drought and some very wet years that I've been hanging out with Ian, that organic farming and their approach to growing grain just results in quality and results in this consistent flavoursome grain. So that's kind of given Ian and I hope as we're trying to push our organic grain growing into this regenerative space where we're moving away from tillage, and we're trying to incorporate more mixed species into our rotations. Just knowing that consistency and that quality has always been there, even though yields have kind of fluctuated, has been, really, really nice for us to see. And just seeing firsthand with my in-laws property, the resilience of that system as well. When you see our neighbours, the quality of their grain really, like the protein levels not hitting it, or shot and sprung in the wet, or like all these different issues that in this organic system we've been able to avoid. So I guess Ian and I are kind of taking that forward with us onto our new farm. But then also, it was only one thing, but one more thing was just that there's been so much support for what we're doing as well, which has been we really jumped into this as a way to be farming. We jumped into flour milling because we wanted to be farming, and we figure grain is this undervalued product, and so if we mill it, we can be making more value from that. But we've just been embraced with open arms from the baking community, and very much thanks to John Reed and to Michael James and to this whole GrAiNZ community, we've been able to keep the propeller moving forward. But that's been, we didn't expect that.
Okay. I guess sitting here struggling to think what I'm going to say, but I think apart from what I really like is the connection with our customers, that feedback, that passion and seeing what they're doing. But if I'm honest, what I really love and get most joy out of is just looking at the soil, the improvement. I can remember sitting on the tractor as a teenager, working, we've got mixed soils and this red ground. You'd have to sow the crop twice because the first time it'd die because it had crust over, and now looking at this soil, it's beautiful brown, full of life. Looking at the mushrooms in your wheat crop, and so, that's what makes me the most proud and gives me the most joy, is just looking at the soil and how far it's come.
I have the misfortune of speaking after three people, but also the fortune of maybe trying to listen and then come up with what I want to say in terms of what's the most inspiring. Firstly, I feel like a massive fraud for being here at all. Have no clue why I've been enveloped by this GrAiNZ community, and I feel very fortunate for that. But leaving that aside, I really think the thing that I find most inspiring, and the thing that keeps me going, with at least very little sleep, 3 kids, a business that's probably not viable, is well, I mean, Court actually said it, is the actual resilience in the system. And not only does that come from farming in a way that builds resilience and builds, I like to talk about it as like building an immune system. You're sort of throwing everything at the, well, I think about it this way, at least in our beer. Sometimes I apply it to other things, but throwing everything at the land, or at least our beer, or everything, and just seeing how the land responds. Or, I mean, I'm not a farmer, so I'm not going to go too far into that. But, these systems, these regenerative organic systems, or agroecological, however you want to call them, do tend to be able to weather these ebbs and flows in, let's just say, different ways, or maybe better ways. And I think that potentially if processors are also on board with that, and this is my big passion point, is like talking to the people who are one step further and saying, okay, like, Stu, my monster is just sitting in the back here. We're going to have a lot of black tip barley this year because it was wet. And so I need to be talking to my colleagues in the industry and saying, like, that has nothing to do with the flavor impact of your beer. Like, you need to be buying this and not just jump ship to Joe White and the Cargills. Because you just look into a bag and it doesn't look the same. I mean, it's the same stuff as imperfect fruit. So if we have resilient farming systems, and also resilient sort of processors as well, who are willing to work with the ebbs and flows of the season, then we do have a more resilient system. And I think that's something that I talk about a little bit when I do talk about these things is that Stu and I, along with the grower that grows the majority of our grains, and we use a lot of Ian and Courtney's grains as well, we know our price basically at sowing. And we can set that price based on acre or based on ton, depending on the year. And if that needs to go up or down, that's just a frank conversation between Stu, myself, and the grower. We're not affected by grain not getting out of Ukraine because of a war. That is a more resilient food system. And it's because of the connection. I think that's certainly the biggest reason that we keep going. I mean, the amount of times, if any of you run small businesses, I'm sure it's the same, the amount of times you're sitting there at 2 a.m. trying to finish off the work so you can start work again at 6 a.m, thinking, why the fuck do I do this? The phone call that I couldn't make is 2 phone calls I couldn't make to close my business. One to Stu to say, sorry, I'm out. And the other is to our grower. And I think that like being held to that by those people just shows the power of human connection. And I think that by far, amongst the resilience in the farming, the resilience in the food system, it's the resilience that we each other give each other by being a part of something, together, and we're sort of co-investors in our products. So that was the most inspiring thing to me.
And it tells us why you do this. It tells us why you get out of bed. I feel like we didn't quite get that answer out of you guys, and I want to understand that, because I feel like you guys have both got incredible amounts to share. Why do you do this? You've been doing this since you were 8 years old. I imagine it feels like it's in your DNA, but there's mushrooms growing in your wheat crops that may or may not make sense to people in the room. For some who don't understand regenerative farming practice, can we deep dive a little bit deeper into what it is that gets you out of bed, and also your practices? I want to understand, and I want everyone else to understand, why your practice is so fundamentally different to other commodity grain growers.
What gets me out of bed? Debt? No. Debt? I just love what I do. I really just enjoy it thoroughly. I mean, there's times when I wonder what I'm doing and it's a bit too much, but I just love growing grain, and I really do enjoy looking at the soil and nurturing the soil. It's just something I've just grown up with. So a bit about my farming practices. So we're Australian Demeter certified biodynamic, which is accredited system. I guess quickly, the fact I like it, it's a simple recipe that if you follow that recipe you get the same repeatable results. I've been fortunate enough to purchase more land in my time, and I've seen the same results time and time again, so it's a good resilient system. The grain growing side of things, we probably, it's about a third to a half of the farm is grown in cash crops we'll call it, and the rest is a mixture of cover crops, green manures and resting. So it's very different to the traditional conventional farmers, where it's basically continuously cropped, the whole lot's cropped every year. So that's one big difference. What else would you like to know? Or pass it on?
Can I ask a quick question? Do you rest under animals, or do you just rest it and let go to pasture?
Yes, I run animals. I'm very busy, and the livestock have to fit in around me, so I sort of buy and sell when I've got the feed, and I'll sell them as soon as I need to. So I basically just buy in wethers to do a job. I haven't got the time or the energy to be running breeding stock and then not being able to sell them when I run out of room. So that's it. So the question was about tillage. Regen sort of built on. Explain what 500 is too. So Regen Ag sort of built on non-tillage, I suppose, and lots of other criteria. And I guess, to be honest, I sort of distanced myself from Regen for a long time. I sort of sort of saw it as watering down certified Demeter biodynamics. Maybe another form of greenwashing, but I've come to realise that it's getting, what's got the momentum, and someone explained to me is just think of it as life, and that's what I'm all about on the farm, is soil life. So yes, I do cultivate, but that art of cultivation has been lost. I've got videos of my cultivated farm and my neighbour's not cultivated farm. His is blowing in the wind. It's zoom around to mine and it's not moving. My soils don't blow because they're full of life. The biology heal the soil really quickly, so it just doesn't blow, it doesn't wash. I've still got fungi in cultivated soil. The wheat crop's fully cultivated. You still get the fungi. So I think if you do it properly, careful, considered cultivation consciously, you can still have soil life and improve your soil, but obviously nothing destroys the soil quicker than bad cultivation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there another
Jason?
question?
There's another question.
Mine was related to that, more about tillage and meeting regenerative ag in a couple of decades, or do you foresee a time when you'll be able to run a biodynamic farm with constant cover?
Look, I've experimented with it a few times, tried roller crimping, and I haven't worked out how to do it properly yet. I'm still learning. We're in a very variable climate, hot, dry summers. Sometimes it's very hard to grow enough cover to plant into. So I haven't given up. It's a work in progress. I haven't seen the examples of other people doing it, but so I'm observing and hoping and watching and learning and watch this space, I guess.
That's something I really admire about Steve and Tanya, is that they've been innovating like constantly over the time that we've known these guys. So I think you guys are doing an amazing job. I think the tillage question is super complex, and it's very easy for people to weaponize tillage when there's far more factors to consider, many more factors to consider, I should say. We're definitely trying to move our little farm away from tillage, and we see a lot of hope in the perennial wheats and the taller varieties, but we also think that it's important to be striving for diversity and to just be monitoring soils and actually evaluating what impact tillage is having on your soils. So we're moving. We don't do any summer fallows on our little farm, and that's really important for maintaining live roots in your soil for as long as possible. And then there's one plough before we sow our wheat crop. If we did do a summer fallow, we would get a higher yielding wheat crop for sure, but then there would be ramifications longer term in terms of soil biology. So I feel like I don't think there's enough happening. There's just not enough regenerative organic farmers around, and the organic, Carolyn would know, so many of our organic farming community they're aging, they're tired, there's a lot of pressure on grain growers. But yeah, Ian and I are definitely hopeful, and we're enjoying seeing what Jason's doing and what the DPI are doing with the perennial wheat, and definitely not giving up. But I just think it's worth being wary of the language around grain growing, because it's often simplified when it's far more complex.
I'm just going to quickly mention, just to add to that, is a bit like you, Jason. The outcome is what you focus on with the mill grains. So whether you use a roller mill or a stone mill, it's the outcome. And I think with every farm, it's the outcome. You know, the soil life that Steve expressed. Doesn't matter the methodology you approach that farming, and this is probably the most exciting thing about the regen side of things, is it's bringing a broader church or broader base of expertise to what we all want, which is healthy soils and healthy food and then healthy planet. And so whatever way we get there is the way where we really deeply immerse our hearts and our heads into that intellectual challenge, you know. And it is incredibly complex, for like your market gardener said, you know, it's much more complex than rocket science. Like it really forces us to engage so much more, particularly, you know, I'm at the consumer facing end, and, you know, how do I engage consumers where out of their own volition, they, you know, take a fork in the road and absolutely commit themselves to, you know, growers like this. They absolutely commit themselves to eating healthily. They absolutely commit themselves to how can they invest every part, you know, their money, and that's what we've done with the shed. You know, they invested their money through a participation model that wasn't around extraction or returns or anything like that. So this is the challenge for humanity, is how do we do this as a community where we don't judge, where we really share our knowledge. And this is the great thing about the RIF, if you read the RIF, that sustainable table have spent a lot of time on, it's been written by, I think, nearly all women. I mean, Josh might be the only bloke. Josh is an Indigenous fella, and Dan, and Wolfgang. He's a bloke too. But the RIF document is written in such a way where it sort of doesn't make anyone wrong, it doesn't put anyone down, it doesn't say, you know, your business model is, it just says it's either Horizon 1, Horizon 2 or Horizon 3. And together we need all those horizons to get to the place where we're not in planetary overshoot and we're not, you know, just hurtling humanity off the edge of the cliff. We're working on that together, and it's going to take all of us to do that together. So I think, you know, the deepest thing I've experienced in the 30-odd years I've been in this space in my own journey has been to, you know, just lay down my judgments, lay down my all of my preconceived ideas I have about people, particularly people with money. And now I'm in the space where, you know, Alistair, you know, we've had a couple of tough conversations with some investors, and it's been really difficult for us to not get down on our hands and knees and say, please give me that money, to have an eye-to-eye conversation where we've overcome the power relationship, the dispowering I feel whenever I sit down in front of an investor, but also where they're at, where they're coming, you know, I've got all the money and I'll make all the decisions about where that money is used and how it's done. So the RIF is sort of, in a remarkably amazing way, is setting us on a trajectory where we're not in the, you know, where we're not all, you know, sitting around going, you know, borderline edge of viability, you know, what's going to happen next year. Sure, the relationships are great, but geez, it'd be great to have some capital that says, you know, here's 10 years to get to a point where you pay 2.5%.
If Robert gets the microphone again, Kira, yes. Okay, so we're looking for an explanation of what a bricks meter does and what the plants that Stephen's planting impact that.
Okay, so the bricks level, it was spoke about earlier, it was during Matthew's talk actually, about how you can judge the nutritional value of your plants or food. The bricks value, it's used in grape growing. It's basically a measure of the dissolved solids in a liquid. So basically you get the leaves off your, I get it off my oat crops or grain crops, squeeze the juice out with a garlic press, put the drops on a sort of like a slide on this prism that you look up through the sun, and that refracts the light, is that the word? And you come up with a measure of how much dissolved solids are in that sap, and that's a basically telling you how good the solar panels are working on the plant, how much sugar they're producing. Yeah, and I often check the plants and, you know, up around the 20 or so, 30, and you look at some of the neighbours and it's down to 3 or 4. The difference that makes to the plant is it's much more resilient to insects, it's more frost resistant because of the higher sugar levels, and it's just a great indication of the health of the plant, how well it's functioning, cycling and working.
Translates
What's
to
happening
flavour.
there, Steve? Like, can you talk about the relationship between the plant and the soil a bit? Like in your system, if you're getting such resilience in your plant, it's functioning differently somehow. What's happening?
Okay, so in a biodynamic system where I'm basically a humus farmer, my whole focus is producing humus. That's my main goal. That's the humus that feeds the plant. You probably all know that it was discovered back in the 20s how plants can only take up water-soluble nutrients, which is true, but nature doesn't tolerate waste. There's no inefficiencies in nature. So if you think about it, how does this water-soluble nutrients survive in the soil and isn't leached out? It's to do with the colloids, the humus, that water-soluble nutrients is bound up in that colloid. So in a biodynamic system, we're producing that humus. It's the sun warmth activates the plants to feeder roots to feed that on that humus only when it's needed. So the plants are fed differently. Conventional and some organic systems use water-soluble nutrients, so the plant's taking up that nutrients whether it needs to or not. As soon as it transpires, it's taking up those water-soluble nutrients. It's in the water, in the soil water, and that they become over-nitrated, heavy. You can see the plants hanging down. They're often bitter, whereas if they're fed naturally how they're designed to, those flavour profiles are in balance. The plant's only fed when it needs to. And the other bonus is your nutrients aren't getting leached into your rivers and streams and causing fish kill and pollution and blue-green algae.
The thing with grains in an industrial system is that they are often subject to very, very long supply chains, of which the farmer is normally just one, or all the players are normally just one component of it. You guys sitting in front of me, though, have attempted multiple components of the supply chain. That adds a whole lot of extra complexity, but it potentially also enables you to maintain control or integrity. I'd love to hear from each of you just very quickly as to which bits, let's be really honest, which bits are, give you a benefit and which bits actually are problematic and difficult.
In our system.
In your multiple, yeah.
I mean, I think they're all difficult, but they all give you benefits. It's sort of one and the same. I mean, for me, I suppose, at least talking from the beer perspective, I got into this because I ate a chicken from Feather and Bone, Grant and Laura. That was literally just Jade just had a proper chicken from them once and was like, that's it. It's the quality. Honestly, it was pretty simple. I'm a bit of a food vigilante, like at least at home, like a militant about what we eat and what we don't eat. And so when you taste something that is so good, it was just immediate that, okay, we have to bring this into my own industry and what we're doing. And so more and more, the overarching thing that we're looking for in our beer is obviously it started with quality, because the quality of the chicken was so much better. And then I thought, okay, surely we can do this with beer. But that's evolving as well to move into a space that is sort of wooey a little bit, but like nourishment. Like, what is it that we are actually doing with the raw materials that we're farming and sort of converting at the malt house and then selling into the industry. And so the thing that I find most challenging. Well, is working with those materials alone, but also it's the most beneficial as well, because we hear it all the time from people that people will taste our beer and they'll say just didn't like beer, or I don't drink much beer, or they do love beer, but they as soon as they taste it, they say that their palate somehow responds in a way that just tells them that that's good for them, and it's definitely not. I mean, it's alcohol, like it's a poison. It's very much a drug that I actually like. Actually, that probably is the most challenging part of what I do, is the fact that we are making a fermented beverage that probably does more damage on the earth than any other drug that's out there. I mean, it's a bit sad to talk about, but it's the reality that we're peddling this product that has so many factors in the negative, and it's something that I have definitely tried to justify what we do by bringing this kind of meaning into it, I suppose, like not only the nourishment, but working with people, because at the end of the day, a beer is a really easy way to ask people to come around a table. You don't. I mean, you can break bread with them, you can have a beer, but it's very different when you ask a mate to go grab a beer with you, or you never say, "Can I go grab a glass of wine?" Like, it just doesn't work. So it is this kind of way to get people around, and so it's sort of this glue to, at least, or like it's a conduit to speak about things. But the challenge is probably the alcohol. I mean, if we could make our beer taste the same without the inebriant, I think that would be really cool. We don't do any non-alcoholic beers. I'm sort of just strictly into what we do. But the exciting part is how the product ends up delivering to the customer. But they're sort of intertwined, I suppose, the challenge, anyway, and the opportunity, I guess, is the answer.
So the challenges in the growing or the distribution, or?
The fact that you do multiples. So lots of sectors, they just become the specialist in one, but you guys have all attempted to undertake multiple components of the supply chain on your own.
Yeah, I guess it's the work-life balance. It really is. It's struggling with that a bit at the moment, being overwhelmed, but that's really the only challenge. We're pretty, we're independent. We're a long way from anywhere. We just get it done, and so Tanya's more the marketing and that side of things. So she'd have different challenges. The bit that works, well, we've got a great distribution network, and we've streamlined it. COVID made a big difference with how we did things. Basically, when we started with small, and we'd just do anything for anyone. If someone wanted a 3.5 kilo bag, we'd give them a 3.5 kilo bag, and literally do anything for anyone. But we had to streamline. We couldn't manage that, so we've cut things out. We're a bit stricter with how we do it, and so that's been a big help, just how we manage all that.
Steve and Tanya's operation is also so tidy, and Ian and I have a joke in the flour mill that we just say, what would Tanya do? We should probably sweep the floor a little bit more than we do, because there's such hard workers. But I think what's in common with the guys that I'm sitting with here on this panel is this generosity and this collaborative nature. Steve and Tan have been very generous in sharing their knowledge with us, and welcoming us on their farm. Topher has opened up his brewery to us. He hosts a pickup point for us through the brewery, so he uses our grain in his beer, but he also allows bakers to come and pick up their flour from his brewery, which that kind of generosity is huge to us, because logistics is an awful thing for us to manage with flour, because it's heavy and it's not that valuable. I mean, yeah, we do, our prices are true to what it costs us, but it's still a very heavy product that we need to ship. And as much as we would like to stick to a 100-kilometre radius of our farm, the reality is that there's a long way to go in terms of educating consumers, and maybe it's also a socio-economic problem. Our customers are mostly in urban environments where maybe there's more of an appetite and a budget for what we're doing. So logistics and getting our head around that is huge. And also the cost of storage as a small farm, like we want to have clean grain on farm so that we can be milling year round. But it's much easier for a farmer to harvest their crop and then just send it off in a truck. So it's like the cost of a silo is, I don't know what it cost us. What did it cost us, Ian? Like 20 grand per, is it 20 grand? Yeah. Like very expensive in terms of the infrastructure we need. And then on top of that, the cost of logistics is huge. Was there another part to the question? The bit that works. Well, I guess I touched on that with this collaborative nature. And then, of course, with Rob, he's kind of been a mentor for us in terms of, I don't know, just bouncing ideas. We were discussing buying a property with an investor, and Rob was able to walk us through that, like just having Rob as a sounding board. But Rob's also setting up the Salisbury Mill, and he was able to work with Ian, and Ian and his brother built a flour mill, which is now in Brisbane. So like Rob, and like I guess the nature of the regen community is that like generosity and that knowledge sharing across, which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, the bit that works, the constraint has been we're trying to operate business models with a true cost agenda in a business as usual world, and that's been, you know, challenging for all of us. And the cost of living crisis last year really exacerbated that. But it's also a bit of a silver lining in the fact that we now recognise it, and it's probably made a lot more investors come to the table because it's, you know, it's an unsolvable conundrum, the cost of living crisis and all the food insecurity and the health and all the things that Matthew mentioned, and yet on the same time you've got all these amazing farmers and amazing value adders and brewers and everyone trying to do things at the right price but a borderline viability. So that's been the real challenge, and I think you know, I'm really excited about the business models of the future, where we use all of our faculties. The piece that's been really great has been the relationships. Wish we had more time for these relationships. You know, it's so important that, and I love beer. Beer, bread, and butter are my three things. And the beer thing, I think we've got to sort of, it's like a lot of things, we've just got to get everything in moderation, and beer and wine elevate our spirits to a level where we can talk about things that we wouldn't talk about previously. And I think, you know, it's the same sort of thing. And that's really good. We've got to be really, you know, honest. And also get shit out, you know, like, you know, we bottle so much of it up, particularly us blokes. And beer gives us an opportunity to have those D&Ms and get them out. So I'm all for beer, and I'm all for getting around table and having those, you know, it's where we fall in love. You know, we fall in love over that first, generally, I should, maybe. I know so more time for having just beautiful relationships and having those real deep, rich, authentic conversations where we plough into the 98% of what we don't know exists. And for me, it's been working with Aunt Lilla, Uncle Cal, Aunt Mary Graham. I don't know if you've heard of Aunt Mary Graham, but we've got this amazing Indigenous elder group up in Brisbane who are so tapped into the depths of, you know, they just channel the elders from so many years ago, pre-Cook, and it blows my mind. It's so subtle, but it blows my mind in terms of the business model when I listen to, you know, conflation of power and authority, Aunt Lilla. There's so many subtle but profound bits of wisdom they have in their culture that we have access to, but we need to immerse ourselves in. And they always say, just come and have a cup of tea with us. So it's not over a beer or a wine, because they have issues around that, very real issues. But having a cup of tea with an elder is probably one of the richest ways we can plough into that other 98%.
Thank you, Robert. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and so I very quickly Want to just go through, you guys are true leaders in the regen space, and you know, there's lots of reason to feel a bit overwhelmed at times, but you guys are actually walking the talk, and I know we've talked about challenges, but can you finish with just one thing that's actually really exciting you on the horizon?
Okay, I'll go first. Let me think.
What's exciting me on the horizon? We've been developing these heritage grains. That's an exciting project. I'm not sure where it's going to go and what the interest will be, but I just love growing different grains and different varieties, so that's been exciting. So that's probably a big one for me.
What are those grains?
What have we got? We've got a red wheat Yakora. That's, it's not that commonly consumed in Australia, but we've got some of that going. We've got a purple straw, which is supposed to be a good, like a biscuit or cake flour. What else have we got? We've got some purple GrAiNZ, so very dark purple. So the actual grain's purple, so that'll be interesting, yeah.
I'm also very excited about the diversity that's being fostered in GrAiNZ. I think that's really exciting and has huge potential, which I've already mentioned, for regenerative cropping. But I guess as a young farmer who's only, we've only had our in place for 2 years, I'm just excited to build our farm in the way that we want to, and it's very slow work and it's very expensive work. I think we're paying $50,000 in interest rates this year, which is painful. So I'm excited for that to end. But I think Ian and I studied environments at uni, and we were really excited to get into it. And you have that, you just want everything to happen now, but with farming and with grain growing, it's like a yearly thing, and in each year we're learning more and more. So that's just an exciting part of farming for me, that each year brings new experiences and an understanding of what we're doing.
Okay, with some time to think. Something that's exciting to me, or that I'm excited about going forward, and what I'm sort of seeing is the diversity of stakeholders that are taking part in what we are calling this larger regenerative agriculture movement, let's say. And that definitely includes the customer side. And so from my perspective, I mean, the fact that I'm here talking at the GrAiNZ conference just shows that this is growing. We're crossing sectors more and more, and more people I speak to, no matter what part they are in. I'm often on wineries or kitchens or grain farms. We're sort of pointing towards the same. We're going somewhere. I sort of feel that movement. Personally, we're sort of, Courtney told you to mention this, I'm excited about, we're starting a cheesery on site at the brewery, using this tiny micro dairy 40 minutes south of us, who Saputo is just about to pull out of the entire area. So this whole 20 farms aren't going to have anyone to be milking their cows. Anyway, picking up their milk, there's all of these structural things that are happening because of $2 milk, however many years ago. That we're not going to be even close to solving that. Not even, we're talking one farm and picking up 2 milkings a week. But we're at the brewery. I think I'm selfishly trying to build this larder of people and foods and products that I just want to eat at home myself. And the access is really fucking tough, right? We are very fortunate to have Feather and Bone really, really close to us in Sydney, and they have an amazing little pantry of things. But we need. I just realized in my own in my own home, I want that access, and I'm very fortunate to be in a position where if I need something, I can generally call someone who makes butter, who whatever. But that's not how it is for everyone. And the diversity of people coming into that is that as we're sort of pushing a little bit in this way of trying to put those products in the same place for a customer who is keen but maybe time poor. We're very willing to spend their dollar there, and that's, as a business operator, exciting.
This is going to sound like I'm being placed here, but the most exciting thing that I'm really looking forward to is working with Sustainable Table and the advisors on the RIF. It is probably the most profound financial document that you will see in the world, apart from maybe RSF Finance's work that they've done over 10 or 15 years. It's a huge opportunity for this sector and it's tricky though, because we've got to go in there with boots and all to have really frank conversations with the people who have got the money. There's a massive amount of capital out there that needs to be unlocked. It's almost like I was talking to Emily earlier on about de-hulling. How do we de-hull that industry and open it up, and we get the whole wheat, the whole flour from that humanity that sits behind the gatekeepers that protect that money. And so I really encourage you to read the RIF, the whole RIF. It was written by a bunch of women. It's paradigm shifting, and it's transformative in terms of what it's asking people with the money to do in terms of going into this space here. We all sort of really need that to have more time to have relationships with each other and do really great mischief together.
Thank you. Before we all head for lunch and do mischief together, I just want to summarise very quickly by reflecting on Paul Hawkins' statement. He talks about regeneration in its entirety as life-giving decisions that ultimately result in positive or life-giving outcomes to humans, to animals, to cultures, to ecosystems, and every single one of us has capacity to contribute to that every single day, not least of which in the way we choose to eat our food. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our amazing panellists.